when our startup took off, it felt like this. I got a call from a number I had never seen before. It was from like Kansas City or something. I answered it, and on the other line was a restaurant owner who said, "Hey, I found your phone number. I need to sign up for your product. How do I do that, and how do I pay you? And also, what does it do?" And that was a weird ordering of things. And that's what a lot of startups actually wind up feeling, which is you're not pushing a product onto a market. You're not doing any convincing. You're not doing much convincing at all. The market is pulling the product out of you. They are showing up. They are buying way more than you are selling.
That's Rob Snyder, Harvard MBA, McKinsey veteran, startup founder, and author of the new book, Power of Pull, describing the moment his struggling company stopped dying and started flying. Here's what I love about that call from Kansas City. The customer asked how to pay for the product before they even knew what it did. Now, that's not a sale, that's a pull. Hello and welcome to the Business of Story. I'm Park Howell. If you have ever poured your heart into something great and still heard crickets, if you've done the research, built the pitch, run the demos, and watched prospects just, disappear, this episode is your wake-up call, because the problem isn't your product. It's that you're pushing it onto people who are not ready to buy, who are not ready to pull your product to them. Rob's pull framework will show you how to find the people who already have the problem, already need your solution, and are just waiting for someone like you to show up. So you're ready to stop pushing and start pulling? Let's get after it. Hello, Rob. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, man. I had a lot of you Harvard boys through here lately, it seems like. It's always nice to go right to the top of the echelon in innovation and business development and so forth. And I am so happy you're here. Would you give our audience a little bit of a backstory, your backstory, as to why you're here and the new book you've got out?
Totally. So I, as you mentioned, came from Harvard where I thought I was really smart. And it turns out, as I went to build my first startup, I wasn't as smart as I thought I was, because I got punched in the face for 2 years where the startup wouldn't take off no matter which of my plans felt right or sounded like they were going to work. And then the business took off and went 0 to 4 million ARR in 2 years, annual recurring revenue in 2 years. And when it did, you'd think, oh, wow, then you figured it out. No, it made no sense to me why it took off when it did take off. And so I've been trying to figure it out since then.
All right, so let's level set. What did you go to Harvard to study?
Business. I went for my MBA there, but I had worked at McKinsey beforehand. So I'd been a consultant. And I knew from consulting that I did not want to work in a big company. And so I said, all right, what's the exact opposite side of the spectrum? Startups. Being a tech billionaire wouldn't be bad. And so why not start a company out of business school? And so I spent the entire time in business school in what's called the Harvard Innovation Lab, a place where all sorts of Harvard students come together to try to launch companies, and took every entrepreneurship class I could.
And what kind of company did you have in mind to launch?
I went through many ideas in school, but we wound up with a B2B software company that did workforce management and scheduling for hourly workplaces.
Okay. And you ended up there because you saw a decided hole in the market, a major problem that you had the perfect innovation to solve?
Exactly. What would I be doing if not doing a bunch of market research, doing a bunch of customer interviews, planning out the future, mapping out what the ideal solution would be, and coming together with something, and even recruiting design partners who were using our minimum viable product. Yeah, so I did all of the things to build what on paper seemed like it was going to take off.
And you're coming from Harvard. I mean, come on. You've got the best teachers, the best innovators, professors around you. How could you miss? Didn't they even provide you with $1 million cash to get it rolling?
We did raise money. So we raised over 1 million to get started. And yeah, it seemed, I was actually talking with one of my professors from back then a couple weeks ago. And I went and talked to him and he's like, "Oh, I remember your business." And he explained it back to me. He's like, that was brilliant. How did that go?" And I was like, "Horrible. It sounded totally right, but it did not work."
Tell us the story. What was your pitch and why did it not work? How did you fix it?
So in retrospect, it's going to sound a lot cleaner, but it was messy at the time. So
Of
the
course.
pitch was that basically we can save you a bunch of money on scheduling. A lot of workplaces spent a lot of time and money on scheduling. They lost money when employees didn't show up for their shifts, and we could solve that. We had a system, a scheduling system that would automatically check in and call people to fill open shifts. And so it made a lot of sense. People would nod when we told them about it. Our design partners used it every single day. And then we tried to sell it to people and they just disappeared. And so when that happened, we're like, all right, I have no idea what's going on. Everything else about this makes sense. And so we just tried different versions of that for like a year. And then, you get to the point where you're like, okay, I feel like people aren't buying this. And it's either that I'm incompetent or something else. And so we tried a bunch of different things. We got sales coaches. We pivoted to a smaller version of the product, just a shift swapping tool. Then, we did a variety of different things for basically the next year, none of which worked.
So you were essentially hunting and guessing at what the market wanted?
Uh, Basically, and doing it though in a way that seemed like it made sense. Like we would interview potential customers. We would try to follow all the kind of ways to keep interviews unbiased. And we would ask about willingness to pay. And we would show demos and we would show mock-ups and we would do co-design and we would do all of that stuff that in theory should have led to them buying and didn't. And so it was really confusing. When it didn't work, it felt like there were a million possible reasons why it wasn't taking off. And it just was never clear what were we doing wrong? Were we totally backwards? Were we like an inch away from it taking off? Like I had no idea. And or was it just that I was really incompetent? Probably, but there's probably other factors. So it was really, really disorienting. And I call this stage the pain cave, which is where nothing works or it's not really taking off and it's not obvious why. And it could be a million different things.
You're in the pain cave, in the dark, dank, messy pain cave. Take us to the moment when everything changed.
This is embarrassing. The moment it all changed, I got a phone call from somebody that I had tried to sell whatever I was selling at the time to. And this was weeks later. And he said, essentially, "Hey, you're a tech guy, right?" I was like, "Yes." Well, so I know you're trying to sell me something. That's not what we need. I need help hiring employees for my restaurant. You're a tech guy, right? You can help us with that. And and I was like, "Yeah, sure. I don't like. Why not? I'll try to
So
figure
he
it out. I've
he
never done
wasn't
anything."
buying your initial
No.
product offering, but he did buy into your expertise as the tech guy and thinking, well, if Rob can build this, then he can probably build this to really answer my need.
Yeah, I think it was more of a, "Hey, I thought of this guy who tried to sell me something and might be able to help here." I don't
Uh-huh.
know that I don't know that he thought very highly of me, but he was like, "Listen, I've probably made 4 other calls before
Fair
this and
enough.
everyone told me to pound sand. Let's try this guy."
So what'd you do?
So, yeah, it was really interesting. So I said, "Sure, let me try. I have nothing better going on. Why not? This is the first time anybody's actually seemed interested. So, sure, let's do it." And so from that moment, I kind of called around to a couple people to try to figure out what I should do. And it turns out that I talked to one of his managers, and the manager said, "If you're trying to help us with hiring, we have this massive database of people who've applied to us in the past and people who've worked for us in the past. Maybe start there." And so I got access to that list and I just started texting them. And I did that. I tracked it all in a spreadsheet. I would send emails whenever anybody was interested. And that spreadsheet became our first product. And we said, hey, I wonder, do you think other people might want this? And so we started talking about it to a couple other restaurants. We started reaching out to other restaurants and they said, oh my gosh, you can do that. Yeah, totally. And that's how the business started.
So, did your initial product completely iterate out of what its initial mission was and evolved into this new product, or is this a complete standalone enterprise?
Yeah, this was there was 0 lines of code carried over
Okay,
from product 1 to product 2.
gotcha. All right, so you've got a whole new business model, a whole new product.
Yes.
Whatever happened to your first one? Did it ever take off, or did you have to just bench it?
No, and I've seen a ton of cases like this since then. Like I've been asking a bunch of people to try to figure out, is this a normal thing or was I just uniquely incompetent? And there's a there's been a lot of times where people are like, oh yeah, of course, we did the exact same thing. We have used 0 lines of code from the first product we built, the first 4 products we built. It's a total rewrite.
Yeah. What's the name of your product now?
So that company was eventually acquired by a company called Sprockets. That's
Gotcha.
old
Okay.
history at this point.
All right. So, really, where this is all led is to your new book, The Power of Pull, that I have found really fascinating because we are experiencing some of the same things you experienced in the launch of yours with the launch of our story cycle, Genie.
Mhm.
And it's just like you said, you talk to people about it, beta testers love it. Some of them will buy it, will fall off. Others will never actually pull the trigger on it. And yet others, we've got ongoing use cases for it. And we are still trying to understand. We're into it 10 months now, of really trying to understand. And I think I'm in the same position that you were early on, although we do have early adopters and they are liking it and using it, just not adopting it as fast as I thought they would. So, the power of pull. Would you walk us through your 4-letter acronym of pull, what it means, how you arrived at those meanings, and then can we dissect it and unpack the story cycle genie and
Let's
you
do it.
coach me on what I'm doing wrong?
Let's do it. I love it.
All
So
right, Rob, let's go.
starting from just the concept, the idea of pull, and then I'll get into the framework.
Yeah.
So pull, when our startup took off, it felt like this. I got a call from a number I had never seen before. It was from like Kansas City or something. I answered it, and on the other line was a restaurant owner who said, hey, I found your phone number. I need to sign up for your product. How do I do that, and how do I pay you? And also, what does it do? And that was a weird ordering of things.
It really is.
And that's what a lot of startups actually wind up feeling, which is you're not pushing a product onto a market. You're not doing any convincing. You're not doing much convincing at all. The market is pulling the product out of you. They are showing up. They are buying way more than you are selling. And we know what this looks like. We call it product market fit. You call it, I think of it as pull, where what's happening is, the market is just buying the heck out of your product. We all know what it feels like. It's just, how do you get there? What happens before that has always been the question. And so that's what the pull framework, what I've been working on for the past, decade, is trying to explain why that happened when it happened and why it didn't happen before then. So the pull framework is an acronym, PULL. And when PULL, those 4 things are present in a customer, before they hear about your product, they are in a state where they would be weird not to rip it out of your hands. They will buy it. Or it would be weird if they didn't buy it, really. And so the 4 letters stand for P, project, U, unavoidable, L, list of options, and second L is limitations. So they have a project on their to-do list that's unavoidable right now. It's not something they can delay or do something else. They have to do this. But they have a list of options that they consider to get their project done. But those options have limitations that prevent them from getting their project done. So you can almost think of it as, I'm trying to do something right now, and I have to do this thing right now, but I kind of can't do it with the options I have available to me. And if that's present, they will rip a product out of your hands. If that's not present, then it'd kind of be weird if they bought it.
How did you come about this?
How did I come about this? Mostly by working. So I spent, after that company kind of wound up getting exiting and whatnot, I started getting pulled into a bunch of friends' startups. And I didn't quite understand why my startup had worked and when it worked. So I was like, well, let me try to apply some of what I learned to your situation. And I knew that there was something about, they didn't really want a product. They had some project on their to-do list they were trying to get to, or a job to be done that they were trying to do. And so I knew it was something like that. And so I would start applying this in startups, and it would kind of work, and then it kind of wouldn't. And so I just kind of kept iterating with the framework until I figured out, okay, they say they have a project, but then they're not buying. Why is that? Oh, well, because their existing options are good enough. Or why, but they don't have good enough options and they're not buying. Well, why aren't they buying? Well, it turns out they could delay the project. So they just did. And so they came back at another point in time. But so it all kind of came together as one thing through a process of trying to implement it and it not quite working like I thought it would.
So, as you were talking about that in story parlance, I talk about where I think of it as the inciting incident in a story where the protagonist, the customer, has something that they absolutely have to do. It's unavoidable, to your point. So they got a project P. It's unavoidable. They absolutely have to do it. They already have a list of options that they know they got to move on one of them. But in every one of those options listed, there is enough of a limitation that is making them second guess what to do. You then, and this is a ubiquitous you as the product founder, needs to show up to understand what that general project category is, the fact of the business model as to why it's unavoidable. It has to happen now. You probably already have to have a pretty good sense of what maybe lists of options they've considered and their limitations, and then therefore you deliver how you can overcome each one of those limitations and are the best decision to be made right now. Am I accurate? Am I clear on that?
That is great. Well said.
The inciting incident. So, and I think I have fallen into this same problem too, is sometimes as founders, we show up and we're trying to tackle more of an existential problem. In my world, your brand storytelling. It's not working throughout your organization. It's fragmented. It's doing more harm than good, even if you've got it even dialed in right. And so what we need to do is recreate this brand story using our story cycle gene. And you've seen the outcome of it because I ran your book through it. I couldn't access your website because I think you're made of JavaScript, but ran your book through it so you could see the intel you get. But my sense after reading The Power of Pull is that I'm thinking too large. I'm thinking too existential. I need to get down and find an exact project somebody's on that's unavoidable. What they're doing isn't working. They don't have a lot of options that they're happy with, and we're the way forward.
I would 100% agree. You want to, but maybe give a little context on how you're currently describing the story cycle, Jeannie, and then and kind of how you're currently framing it, and then maybe we could dig into
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Rob, I appreciate that, and for all you listeners out there too, what Rob's going to run me through here, we have not rehearsed this, so this is live. I'm just showing all my cards here because I thought I was pretty smart until I launched this thing, and now I'm realizing, I've got a lot of places I need to build on. So as we're doing this, apply this to your own world, and by the way, get his book and read along as you're listening along. So what we are doing, and we launched it 10 months ago, and like I said, we've had some really good traction. We've had people falling off because they're not using it quite as much. We have others that are really going crazy with it. where we have found ourselves and we feel like our most, and what people are telling us is we are a story ops platform. So, from the business world, everyone has marketing ops and rev ops and HR ops and supply chain ops. They have ops across the enterprise that are all governed by their own operating systems that are hopefully not cobbled together, but are in sync across the enterprise. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yes.
That's their goal, right?
Yes, yes,
Whether they
yes.
are in sync or not. The one op they have never, ever really pulled together, optimized is their story, their brand narrative op, so that every department, every channel, every internal, external communication medium is sharing the same coherent, consistent story. I mean, how many times in your life have you been out there and you said sales are saying one thing, marketing saying something else, HR is telling recruiting something completely different, and oh, by the CEO is doing a keynote right now, and he's talking about something we don't even know about, right?
Oh, yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
so this is an existential problem, and trying to simplify it to that project needed right now is how do we get coherent and consistent so that our story is as strong as possible across every medium, every department, every team.
I love it. Okay. Do you mind if I get to work
I
now?
love it. Yeah, go
Okay.
for it. Here we go.
Let's so
Take the gloves off.
there have been people who have used it and love it. I don't want to hear about the company. I want to hear about the person. Is this a head of brand? Is this a CEO? Is this a CMO? Like, who is the person?
And there's a lot of different kinds of personas. Let me tell you about Brian Burkhart.
Okay.
Brian Burkhart is a solopreneur. He is a brilliant marketing, storytelling, leadership type coach, and he's a friend of mine. He does a lot of work in big healthcare cases and whatever to help them define their stories for everything from either selling products or even defending themselves in court, against
Mhm.
malpractice suits or whatever. And so he is a story shaper. And then he can go in and we'll work with big financial companies, whatever, and help them define a very core belief out of a very complex story. He has started using the story cycle genie, and it has been blowing his mind. This is a guy that's been in the world, business world, 30 years doing this stuff. And he goes, the amount of information that it provides me that is so on brand, that listens to me and my input is just mind boggling. So that's and he's been using it now for a couple months.
Okay.
And he just keeps using it. And he goes, I just keep creating this amazing content way faster than I ever did before.
Okay. So then, what one thing to think about with pull is that pull is always a thing that exists at the individual level. It is a person. It is never a thing that exists at a company level because companies can't buy things. They are not real entities. It always has to be a person. There's a person with a project on their to-do list. And in the way you've described it so far, with this case, but then with a couple others, there's a couple of different kind of projects that it could be, pulls that it could be. So it was Brian, was it?
Brian, yes, Brian
Brian.
Burkhart of Square Planet.
Okay. So what it sounds like Brian is saying is, I am trying to produce brand assets faster without sacrificing quality, right? That could be what he's trying to do with it. And that's an
Mhm.
example. And it's because I'm a consultant and very sought after. This is the kind of constraint on my business is my ability to develop assets that are actually on brand. That's one example. I could imagine there are other examples of I don't know, brand leaders in companies.
Well, let me give you one. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
okay.
let's go from the solo
Yeah.
entrepreneur to now the very large enterprise. It's a global electronics firm. Can't share their name, but there's a gentleman inside of it that handles one of their divisions on high definition screens for corporate and entertainment settings. I mean, we're talking big, big stuff. He has a very defined niche in which he needs to sell to, he came to us. We were, showing him how he can put this together. He said, our problem is we are completely fragmented. What product is giving me the intel is not the same thing that marketing is telling, that is giving to our sales team. And then the sales team are out there and they are completely stymied in the presentation. Will your platform be able to pull all of that together for me so that I've got one single source of truth about this particular product line that I can spread throughout a team of 80 people, from product developers to marketers to sales, that I can actually measure the outcome of this narrative? We call it narrative entropy when you don't
Mhm.
have a story ops system in place. And that is what he's feeling.
And is this person in marketing or is this the division leader?
It is the division leader.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that. So,
Yeah.
so for that person, the pull there, I don't know why this is urgent or unavoidable for him at this very
Well,
moment.
I can tell you
Okay.
he's got sales targets that
Uh,
he has to hit now. Very
okay.
aggressive.
And so I've got aggressive sales targets. And what I am seeing out of my different departments is a bunch of fragmented messaging, right? That's the unavoidable now. And I'm not going to be able to hit my sales targets unless we get on the same page, our 80 people get on the same page about our story. Therefore, on the project side, I want to make sure that by default, all of our stories, all the things that we do, all the things we say, all the things we show fit our story without me having to personally oversee every single message. And I have looked into mandates, edicts, story guidelines, and I don't know what the limitations are, but I would assume they don't guarantee this by default.
Nobody follows them.
Nobody follows them. Okay. So then this is really interesting because let's just take this as a common pull framework. There's somebody in an organization who is like the person who cares about the story, or the person who's responsible for the story, or the person who has ruled out all other options and is seeing that our narrative isn't clear. That person is trying to make sure that the story carries through everything that they are doing. And all of the existing options do not get followed because they're not plugged in to where the employees are where people are doing their work. They have to be referenced in some other place. That is what pull looks like. That is a person who is stuck before you exist. Now, the question is, if you show up to that person, how do you need to describe your product? I'm happy to tell you my answer, but do you want to
hear
do you
mine
wanna take
first? Okay.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know. I had that long pregnant pause there to see if you were going to share. How would I describe it? I would always default to, like you said, to the individual. They are the hero at the center of this journey. What's keeping them up at night? What's the angst? And how can we help them overcome it and actually get them, as you say in your book, to say, hell yes, let's go, right? So I would talk about the frustration and the energy suck that goes into trying to herd cats around a brand story about a particular product line that may not even be really dialed in yet. Maybe that's job number one, is to really get that story codified so it becomes a single source of truth for that product line, and then show them, which is even more exhausting to do without our product, is how you then indoctrinate, embed it in a consistent, coherent way that gets your sales and marketing team to first believe, yes, I believe this story. I believe this story is going to work. I believe we can deliver on this story. And then to get them consistent on telling that story so that they can see the final outcome of real revenue being developed, simply because they have pulled that narrative. They've stopped the narrative entropy, and they've created a core story ops that everybody lives by.
Hmm. I like it. Here, let me give you what I have seen in cases like this, and this is where what I find a lot of people get stuck. So the first hard thing, which you've actually done way better than most people that I have found, is that you've given me the context to be able to write what a pull framework really is. That you actually have found somebody who is stuck and should rip this out of your hands. And the goal is just to find more of them and then not convince them not to buy. Essentially, you just don't dissuade them from buying. However, the way that we tend to describe our products as entrepreneurs, as people who like products and like AI and like building things, convinces people not to buy. So, if I'm in a situation where I have these revenue targets, or I'm responsible for making sure all of our brand assets, all of our stories are like coherent, and the sales team, if I've done all the work and I can't show to my boss that people are actually using the story that I just spent a bunch of money and time doing, like, I'm in a bad situation. And so in that situation, all you need to do is show up and say something very simple, which is, we offer a way to make sure your story fits in everywhere on autopilot with no extra work from you. And then here's how that works, right? A couple bullet points underneath that.
Say that again. Your story fits in everywhere.
We offer a way to make sure that your story is used by default, fits in everywhere, that you're on autopilot without employees having to even think about.
Great.
And then you pause there. That description alone should release the tension in the air. It should cause them to lean in, because it's not about your product description. It's about pull, which was there before. You're basically auto-completing the thing that's in their brain of, here's where I'm stuck, here's what I've tried, here's why it's not good enough. And so our goal is to say the fewest possible words that help them realize they can get unstuck, that they can overcome the limitations to get their project done.
Yeah. And it plays to the old saw that we always talk about, is your product story is not about what you make, but what you make happen. And even I, who knows this inside and out, working with my partners at the Story Cycle Genie, we get so trapped in the curse of the expert inside the Genie walls of what we've built. 2 years of just some amazing programming and, prompting and working with Gen AI and so forth, that it's hard for the founder to shake off those shackles of expertise and be able to say it as simply as you just did right there.
And to be clear, I can barely do this for my own stuff. So this is normal. You do want somebody else to help you with this. But then let's double click, because I just gave you the highest level description of this.
Right.
But based on what you said, there's going to be a couple double click points here that are likely to be very relevant to your potential customer, and they're things that they are likely to ask about. The first is some way, like on autopilot, it plugs into where your team is already doing their work. So I don't know, maybe it's available by MCP and it plugs in. So whenever they ask to create an asset, it refers to the story first or something like that. I'm just making it up. I don't know exactly how it works, but like that's a reasonable thing.
Well, and we've got an MCP server, and now I'm already way out of my league because I don't understand the coding and development side. That's for Sean and Matt. But yes, in an enterprise, they can literally plug in the Story Cycle Genie anywhere within their systems with complete and utter security.
And it means that that basically this can just plug into the tools your team's already using. So by default, your story will be integrated and used without, like on autopilot, without long employee trainings, without da-da-da-da-da. That's piece one. Piece two is the implication of that is not just that your team is using the story. It's you get visibility on how often people are using it, in what ways it is being used, so that you can report, if you're a brand leader who's trying, but you can report upwards on how much the story is being used, and you can potentially even track some analytics on the revenue uplift as a result.
Absolutely.
And so those would be the 2 points that I would double click into.
All right, the double clicking points. I'm just making notes here. That's great. Now, you also talk in your book about that repeatable customer success story.
Yes.
So, and I want to go back because real quick, my first take, we've never met, but I loved your book going through and your background, and you come in, very high level thinker. You obviously have it, passion and ambition, enthusiasm for what you do, thinking very large because you have to as a founder to get out there in the world. But everything you are talking about is really down in what I would call the fog of war. That I got a project, it's unavoidable. I've got a list of options, none of them great. Therefore, I need you, right? So you get this purely, I guess, through talking with your customers, talking with the people that bought and then went away, people that didn't buy. You actually literally have to get down and do the nitty gritty interviewing of people if they'll talk to you and give you the right intel.
And that's so important because you come out of business school or you spend enough time on X or LinkedIn or whatever, and you think at the macro level. Here's the trends that are changing the world. Here's the architecture of da 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 da. Here's how, and you think at the technology level, and you feel really smart. But the challenge is people have to buy it. Startups that take off have pull. They've found people who rip the product out of their hands. And that doesn't happen at scale. That always happens as an individual decision for an individual customer, one customer at a time. And so you have to understand this in what customers are saying. There is no other level of understanding. And if you try to zoom out from there, you'll miss it. So where I often see this and what I do a lot of the time is I'll literally just review sales calls, review recorded sales calls. And in the sales calls, you can fill out the pull framework just listening to the customer talk. Now, it's just not what we typically look for in a sales call. They will come and tell you what their pull is. And then because we're not looking for it, we'll hear things about pain points or complaints or whatever. And we'll wind up pitching whatever we want to pitch or trying to make our product seem big. And they won't understand it. And we won't understand why they didn't understand it. And so it all kind of comes to bear in in these little conversations and these little sales calls. That's where the answers are.
Yeah. So let's lead then into that idea of these repeatable customer success stories. You are getting these stories, and you're obviously, is this as obvious as I think it sounds, as you're simply sharing a testimonial of a customer that was successful with your product to a prospect that is like that customer and could have equal success with your product.
So the repeatable customer success story or the repeatable case study is one of the most powerful concepts that I have a hard time articulating. So bear with me here for a second. But the idea here, it's a very simple idea, which is that a startup produces case studies. We just produce case study. We produce successful customers. They came to us trying to solve something. We help them solve it. Done. Case study. Well, what a startup really is it's producing not a bunch of different case studies. It's producing one case study that repeats a lot of times. And it turns out when you show a case study to a potential customer, they look at it and tend to say, oh yeah, that's just like me. That's what I want too. Yeah. They understand what you do, who you're for, the story is what they want. They don't really want the product. They want the kind of completion of a case study. And so what I've found is that in sales, you can kind of listen to the customer and say, oh, you remind me of this other person. And you show them a case study of that. They understand it and they buy based off the case study.
You had mentioned you started that by saying that you didn't really know how best to articulate it. Can I offer you up a little training from my end
Please.
since you've been so kind in training with your poll
Please.
strategy? Here's something to think about that has worked really well for me really throughout my 40-year career in branding and marketing is rethinking a case study, and I like to take study out and say story,
Mm,
because I want to reframe the idea of telling this study as truly a human impact story that's playing right off of what you've said from the very beginning. The pull strategy is about finding an individual that has a project that's unavoidable limited options they don't like, and you're going to solve that for them. So, in a case story, take me to a moment and put a timestamp on it. Was this last June? Was it September of 2023? Was it Tuesday? That and give me a location. Where did this happen? In Boston, in New York, in Phoenix, Arizona, whatever. So my audience can picture it. It fires up the theater of the mind. That timestamp says, oh, I'm being told a story. Stories are temporal. Something must have happened. I better pay attention to it so that I learn what to do in case whatever happens in this story ever happens to me, all in the realm of survival. The location stamp fires up the theater of the mind. Oh, I've been there. I know where that is. Oh, that's kind of cool. It could be in a building. It's a sixth floor of the IBM Center in Manhattan, whatever. Then you introduce an individual. Who's that person who by proxy represents the larger organization? So again, playing off of the individual you're talking about in your poll strategy. You can name them if they allow you to, or if you want to, protect the innocent or protect the guilty, if you will, you could say, we're going to call her Jill, and then you get in. Jill was trying to do this, and she had this unavoidable thing right here that she had to do, but she was limited by doing this. She didn't even know that this solution was that we offered was available. We showed it to her. She immediately jumped on it. Within the first 3 weeks, she had X, measured impact by doing it. And Jill couldn't be happier for what she's done. Are you like Jill? So what you're doing is taking the organization, you do mention the organization, but you take the organization out of being the central figure in that case story and you make it about the person. And the reason why that is that Homo sapien storytelling ape that you are communicating to can relate to the person. It cannot relate to the organization.
Yeah, I love that. Right. The person is the main character in
Yeah.
this story.
And by proxy, they represent the customer.
Yeah, they represent they represent you. And it's not the company, because you're right. Like I don't relate to IBM at all. I don't relate to there's a lot of things and you know what else it's not about? It's not about our product either. Our product plays a supporting role in the case story here. But it really is about this person getting their project done.
Yeah. And getting their needs met, both emotional and physical.
Yeah.
Let's take the exhaustion out of it. Let's take the fear out of it. Let's bring the success into it. Let's get you set up as the victor in this thing, moving them from victimhood to being a victor in the process.
Yeah, which actually reminds me of a story of a startup that had a similar story to mine, where they were really smart Stanford founders who had spent a year and a half, 2 years just getting punched in the face by the market and just staring down customer indifference. And then they had a financial advisor reach out to them and say, "Hey, I heard about your technology." It was a next door neighbor to one of the founders. I heard about this. Could we give it a try at our fund? And they started using it. They loved it. And then the startup was like, okay, well, we don't know anything about financial advisors. So do you mind if we just tell your story to a couple other financial advisors? And they wrote a quick case study. And they sold in the next 2 years to like 30,000 financial advisors or something crazy like that. They went from, zero to raising $80 million in 2 years, and one of the faster growing startups. And it was all because they were just showing a story of a financial advisor. And they didn't have they had a couple slides in a sales deck, and that was basically it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. So let me ask you, bounce one more audience off of you, and if you can tell me the very vulnerable question of mine, am I pushing or am I pulling? Because that's really, to me, what your book is about. Stop pushing. People don't like to have anything ever pushed on them. Pull them into your story so that they pull the product out of you. Like you say, the hell yes, I want to have a part of this, right? So we've talked about, okay, my good friend, Brian Burkhart, and I would put him in the marketing consultant and even maybe in the small SMB world, although we haven't really talked about that. We talked about the very large electronics, company. And now let's talk about the ad agency world. We and my principles that help created the story cycle genie all come from running ad agencies. So we say, we have built this, it's built by ad principals for ad professionals. And the idea here is agencies can white label this, they can do way more work, way faster, actually, in some cases, way better because of the intellect of the genie working on it. And so, this push pull idea is one of the ways I come into them and talk to them about this is if you are pitching a new prospect, you have about a 24% chance of winning is what the industry says. So, and you may put 10 grand into this pitch, you may put 150 grand into this pitch. And yet your odds are 1 out of 4 that you are going to win this because everyone is kind of showing up the same way, showing capabilities and whatever. And I said, turn that into a pull strategy. Take your customer, the prospect, run their brand through the story cycle genie like I did with yours. You didn't know me, I didn't know you, we had never talked, but I sent it to you. Run theirs through to get an initial brand evaluation where their narrative currently sits, validating what they're doing well, revealing gaps that the agency could fix, and even inspiring them with new ways to launch. And so instead of pitching your capabilities, you're pulling them in by demonstrating your ability to act the moment they hire you because you've already got the intel in place.
Hmm. Hmm. So this is interesting. What I find is that when you find pull, you don't do any pitching. You being you in the room. You don't really do any pitching. You don't do any education. You don't do any persuasion. Really, it is you're finding people who are stuck. And so when I'm hearing your story, I'm hearing there's an SMB direction, there's an ad agency direction, there's a corporate direction. What I have tended to see is that for the startups that take off, they find one where there is really pull. And that one is the customer that comes in and maybe they come inbound. Maybe they look a little different than the one that you were expecting to come in. But they, as you're pitching, as you're kind of explaining and educating, they're impatient because they were already sold when they showed up and they don't need to hear this. And so what I've seen is that that's where startups that take off always wind up optimizing for. And you realize, oh, you know what? These ad agencies, I always go and pitch them and I tell them a story and they nod and they nod and they sometimes get back to me and a lot of times they don't, but it always feels like a good conversation. Okay, that's not what pull feels like. If you feel like you're doing any sort of education, persuasion, telling them about the vision, telling them about the theory of your product, that's pushing, that's convincing. But you say, but you know what? This big corporate, it came inbound and hadn't been following me for a long time. They just said, listen, I am under the gun for this. This is the thing that I'm struggling with and you can solve it? Okay, cool. It was a weirdly fast sales cycle and we've had a couple that have kind of looked like that. Oh, that's an indication that there is pull there. And your education, your persuasion in those sales calls is almost certainly counterproductive for you. You could have much shorter sales calls that are way more effective. And it's like, oh, if we just focus on those and find more of those, we can grow really fast. Why not do that? And I did that a lot too, where I'd have people calling me and buying really fast. And I was always like, well, I don't understand that, but I want these other people to buy from me. So why don't I go try to sell to them? And the answer was always no, just focus on the people who pull the product out of your hands, design for them, and you'll realize the product gets simpler, the pitch gets simpler, sales gets easier, the web, like everything else downstream gets easier.
Yeah. And there's got to be a point, though, especially in the founder stage. And I would like to actually make a point right here before I ask this next question. For me, your book isn't just about founders and startups. Any company that is selling anything can benefit by your book because I don't know of any operation that is 100% revenue optimized.
Mm.
There's always room to grow, and I think your whole pull strategy plays across the spectrum. That's my humble opinion.
That
Anyways,
means a lot. I really appreciate that. Yeah,
but let's go back to the startup, the founder. You launch something, you have to push information. You have to let people know what it is, just so they know you're on the radar somewhere. And you do that, through your outreach, your website, your podcast, whatever that might be. And in some cases, and I will say in a lot of cases, and maybe I'm doing it wrong, is I reaching out to my warmest market, my colleagues, my friends, the people who have done it, and I needed to push the genie on them, not so much to sell them on it, but for me to get clear how to communicate this story that's actually going to resonate with people. But the problem with that too comes in, we get so busy pushing and trying to get clear on our own story, we don't take enough time to stop and listen to their reaction and how they might tell us our story is landing.
totally. Totally. Yeah, every startup starts out trying to push. Although I have seen cases. There's a university startup that I saw where they dropped out of university and they randomly got a meeting with somebody important at, we'll say, ESPN Disney type company. And that person said they didn't know what they were building. And they said, "Would you pay us to do anything for you?" He said, "Oh, thank you for asking." And then they landed a bunch of other companies just like that. And so it can basically be all pull, but often you start out pushing and you start out pushing, trying to persuade, and you find it doesn't quite land. And it doesn't quite land, and you have to figure out why. Well, the 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 book lays out a way to sell to try to figure out what they will pull. And I think that's really important, which is, yeah, as you try to push, as you try to persuade, some people will buy, others won't. You have to have a way to interpret who buys, who doesn't, why do they buy, why do they not buy? And that's what the pull framework lets you do, which is, okay, you've twisted a couple arms, you've gotten a couple people, but some of them bought kind of weirdly fast. And it wasn't because it was you, it was because they were being selfish about it in a good way. And so we have to that's what we have to figure out as quickly as possible and build our business around that, because I'm sure pushing is exhausting.
It is. And it tears down your ego.
Oh yeah.
You're like, oh
I
God, I
have
got
none
another
left.
no.
So it's yeah, mine's just been bludgeoned, out here. But it's good. And what I try to do early on is I basically go out and just say, "Hey, I want you to tell me why this isn't a good fit for you." Like that would be the most helpful thing for me,
Mhm.
so that I'm not uh persuading them or hearing what I want to hear, and then they kind of disappear, and then I never learn anything. Like I view a sales call as see if they try to buy call, not as much as me convince them to buy call.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. So, in closing here, what are the three things that I should do next? And by proxy, all of our listeners that are like, I really like this pull strategy. What do we need to do next to be more successful and maybe landing a few more pieces of business?
Hmm. So for you specifically, I would look across your current customers and say, who bought weirdly fast and used it as if it was addictive? And compare and contrast those to people who didn't, to try to figure out what is pull really? Like who has pull and what is it? So maybe we can narrow down to one kind of person that we're focused on, one pull framework that we're trying to repeat. That's thing one. Thing two is once you figure out what the smallest possible way to describe your product in the context of that pull would be. So it's no longer this big thing. It's this small thing that just plugs in and gives you visibility into how your story is being used and whether it's being used, that you can use to measure, that you can use to report up. And that's all it is, period. And then third is go find people who you think fit that profile. The people who have pull, show them, have them talk to you, see if they do have pull. Show them the supply, show them that really tiny thing that we just talked about, and see what happens. Lean back, see what happens. Do they try to buy? If they try to buy, if they lean in, if they pull, It's like, all right, cool. Let's do more of that. Let's find more of them. And then and if they don't, iterate until you figure out who does.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what are you doing these days? Are you purely in the consulting world?
No, I have a couple products. I'm unfortunately still
You
building.
say that with a sigh.
I, yeah, am I am bootstrapping a couple software things, and I am advising a bunch of startups, and I'm involved in venture. So I do a bunch of things that are all related to how do you make things take off. And I just find it to be super fascinating. A lot of startups will bring me in to review their sales calls and help them figure this stuff out.
Yeah. And what did you think? Although I pushed it on you, you didn't pull it in when I sent you the write-up the Genie did for your brand. And again, based on your book, because it could not read your website, it's in JavaScript, something you might consider for searchability.
Yeah. The thing that when you were sending that to me, I was thinking, I don't feel like I have a good way to position or communicate what it is that I do. And so you sent that across, and I was like, wow, these are things that I've been chatting with AI about and have not been getting as good answers as this. So I was like, oh, this is really nice.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you liked it. You can always, I'll pull you in. You can pull it out of my hands. You can start using the Genie to build your brand story and all of your customers' brand stories. And
Love it.
that's all the pushing I'm going to do right now. Rob, thank you so much for being here. This has been just a marvelous conversation, and you really made my day.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Where can people learn more about you?
I am at robsnyder.org and on LinkedIn.
robsnyder.org. Are you a nonprofit?
A lot of my tech businesses are, unfortunately.
I got you. All right. robsnyder.org on LinkedIn, and go to Amazon to get your book. Highly, highly recommended, folks. You're going to love it. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. I'm so happy you were here with our conversation with Rob Snyder, and feel free to share it with anyone you know who would benefit from Rob's pull strategy. It's really a remarkable book, whether you are a startup, an SMB, an ad agency, a large enterprise. Check it out. Very well worth the read. Now, I hope you'll join me on Monday when Ryan Cohn is going to be here. He is a remarkable British entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Point One World, an innovative climate initiative that invites businesses to donate just 1% of their revenue to accelerate the clean energy transition. But the real reason I'm bringing him on the show is because they have a remarkable brand narrative that is so simple that you can learn from it. It is this. It just simply says almost nothing changes everything, and you have to hear how that entire story comes together with their brand. And until then, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make that one epic. Thanks so much for listening.